Welcome back. We're talking about the results of the National Beef Quality Audit, and we're here with the experts. Let's return to our discussion. Now, Keith, there are a lot of differences from one end of the beef supply chain to the other, and one of those is the language each one of us uses. Now, how was that manifested in this year's audit?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, for the first time we were able to quantify in the phase one of the National Beef Quality Audit the responses to the face-to-face interviews. One of the questions that we asked this time around was, how do you define various attributes associated with beef quality? Mm-hmm. And we sort of divided that up into 7 categories of quality, if you will. We had food safety, we had beef eating satisfaction, mm-hmm. how and where the cattle were raised, mm-hmm. lean, fat, and bone, or carcass composition, weight and size, genetics, and then visual characteristics. Mm. And these buckets of quality categories, they applied regardless of whether you were a cattle feeder or you were a retailer or a food service operator. You could define these categories however you wanted. And what we found is that some of the definitions for those categories were vastly different from each other. And so, for example, the quality category, how and where the cattle were raised, we had extremely different answers depending on whether you were a cattle feeder versus a retailer versus a food service operator versus a packer. And so that was where some of the disparity in definitions associated with beef quality came in.
Well, does that really matter?
I think it's important because it indicates to us that there is a discontinuity in how we communicate up and down the supply chain of the beef industry. So, for example, as you move closer to the consumers, then things that were more important to retailers and food service operators were sort of social type of issues, animal well-being, those types of topics. As you work back upstream in the supply chain, cattle feeders, for example, I think things like vaccination, health history, health management practices were more important. And so things change depending on where you were in the supply chain. And that indicates to us that there's a difference in economic signals that perhaps are being passed up and down the chain. For example, when it comes to carcass weight, we know that carcass weight has continued to increase for the last 100 years, basically. I don't think there's any consumers that are going into grocery stores and asking the grocery merchandiser to provide bigger steaks for them. So the economic signal for larger cattle is not coming probably from consumers. And so you have to wonder, where is that being introduced into the marketing chain? Because there certainly is an economic signal for cattle producers to raise bigger cattle.
That's interesting. Jeff, tell us about the findings about quality from a packing plant perspective.
Well, one of the things I want to share with you and with the audience is the level of bruising that we found this time. In 2005, in the quality audit, we had 64.8% of the carcasses that had no bruises. This year, in 2011, it was to 77%, so a great increase in the number of cattle without bruises. And I think it's a tribute to the work that the cattle producers are doing and all the attention that's been paid to animal handling and trucking and offloading and things like that are making a big difference in the number of bruises that cattle have today.
That's great news.
Good.
Jason, you told us that you engaged producers in a new and unique way in this year's audit. How did they perceive quality?
Yeah, we asked them, when you hear the term quality relative to the beef industry, what does that mean to you? And the 2 answers that came to the top were raising cattle and calves that are healthy, and also producing beef that is safe and wholesome. So it was pretty clear that producers equate these 2 concepts with quality, and up until this point we really didn't have a great idea of what they thought quality was.
So do producers believe they can make a difference in terms of quality?
Yeah, we actually asked them further, how do you think you influence quality? And 96% of them said that they actively do something on their farm or ranch to influence quality. And the number 1 reason was preventative health care, such as vaccines, as a way of trying to proactively influence quality in the beef chain. And we also found out that 9 out of 10 producers that responded to the survey have a relationship with their veterinarian related to the use of animal health products. We call that a veterinary client-patient relationship as a technical term, but it's a great way to make sure you are properly using preventative health care and also properly using health treatments for animals that might be sick. So a lot of producers are being very proactive with health care as it impacts quality.
So Jason, can the quality improvements we see at the packing plant be attributed to the improvements that producers have made?
Yeah, I think we could actually give quite a bit of credit to the Beef Quality Assurance Program for some of the improvements. One of the examples would be injection site lesions. And what we found in our survey was that currently 87% of producers choose to give an injection in the neck region, front of the shoulder of an animal, versus historically it tended to be in the rear of an animal and devalued some cuts. And we also found that 84% of producers would prefer using a subcutaneous method under the skin rather than intramuscular, again, trying to avoid causing injection site lesions. So some really big improvements on injection sites that we can truly say producers have changed the way they're doing things.
That is encouraging. So just how widespread is BQA?
Well, that is one of the questions we directly asked. We said, have you ever been to a meeting that talked about how to reduce quality defects? And 78% of producers said that they had attended such a meeting. And then we asked, have you ever heard of beef quality assurance? And 87% of producers indicated that they had heard of that. We asked those, just the people that's responded yes to that question, have you ever gone through a beef quality assurance training meeting? And 71% said that. So ultimately, of all the people that took our survey, 43% were beef quality assurance certified. So that's a huge number of producers out in the country.
Dr. Patterson, you and your team at NCBA lead the Checkoff-funded BQA program, and I'm interested, how have you been able to make this information on animal handling techniques so available to so many people around the country, and what impact has it had?
Well, it's had a great impact of what you don't see in the audit now, injection site blemishes, bruises, those kinds of issues. How did we get that accomplished? We got that accomplished by going through our state BQA coordinators, their educators, the state beef councils, their educators, the state cattlemen's organizations, the guys that are the state beef specialists. They all teach proper BQA protocols and procedures. In addition to that, we've got a great communications team that puts the information out nationally, as well as beginning to use things like Facebook and webinars. So we think we've got a good communications program to get this information out.
And you can get more information on the beef quality audit by visiting bqa.org. We're so excited to be bringing the results of the National Beef Quality Audit to our audience. Our discussion continues right after this.